Thank you. Ta-da. Good evening. We're almost done with day one. If you don't know me, in my free time, I submit presumptuously titled JSConf talks. And sometimes I write funny tweets, such as, a JavaScript function returning this shall henceforth be known as a selfie. Before the talk, thank you, Jake. Before the talk, I work for Contentful here in Berlin. They paid for my flight, and they're hiring JavaScript developers. So check it out, yo. OK, the meaning of words. I want to start by reminding you of someone's guiding principle. Creators need an immediate connection to what they're creating. This is Brett Victor's guiding principle. I'll show you some of his ideas following this principle to give you an idea of what he's talking about. So on the right side, we have an editor. On the left, we're showing the picture the code generates. The editor allows direct manipulation of values. Changing a value on the right gets us immediate results on the left. There is no compilation or any other sort of waiting. Every change is instant. So Brett thinks this immediate connection is very important. You can't do certain things if the computer makes you wait all the time, and I very much agree. Brett is very inspiring. Go watch all his videos if you haven't. I think his ideas should be part of every creative environment. However, I thought I'd apply his principle to something different. So the ideas I'll show attempt to remove everything that stands between your idea and running or sharing it as a program. So do we have an immediate connection to what we're creating in JavaScript? Nein, ich glaube nicht. I think this principle is often violated. There are many things which are actually disconnecting us from our creative process. Setting up development environments is a pain in the ass. Here's a tweet. If you set up your development environment yourself, and if you can't tear it down and recreate it in one command, you are coding a prototype. I think Jessica makes a very good point here. You shouldn't have to copy-paste command sequences from a README or from Stack Overflow answers with the highest vote rating or whatever, or blog posts. All of this stuff really must be automated. But even if you're using something like Vagrant, it's going to take time until your environment is set up. Alas, we're not done with waiting for things. Another thing we wait for is long-running tests, or npm install, or deployments to servers. For example, when a test run takes more than a few minutes, I can't do anything during that time that changes its outcome. I'm forced to work on something else, and when I get back to the test result, when it's done, my mind will have lost all context. Another disconnect is managing package dependencies and releasing packages. We depend on packages hosted on NPM, GitHub, and other places. But where it gets really fun is when you're publishing your own packages there. Because coordinating between these different services is difficult, and you will make mistakes unless you're very careful. For example, it's possible that you mix up version numbers between NPM and GitHub. There's even more to fix, like randomly occurring CI errors, test timeouts, or third-party failures. Here's a tweet that sums it up nicely, I think. Programming is the act of fixing one error so that you may proceed to the next error, by Michael Fogus. I think that's very true, and it's probably ironic, but I don't really know. Probably not. So this is Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog by Caspar David Friedrich. And as you know, pictures have different interpretations, just like JavaScript syntax rules. John Geddes, an American historian, felt that the impression of the wanderer is contradictory, suggesting at once mastery over a landscape, but at the same time, the insignificance of the individual within it. Computers are insanely powerful, but still we can rarely realize the full potential of our ideas. Maybe we are the wanderer above the sea of computation. We like to look at terminal windows, or at least we think we do. It is certainly part of our identity. The text displayed to us offers sort of abstract descriptions of what's going on. It alerts us of problems, and eventually it will always ask us what we want to do next. So while the terminal is a great interface, I think we're too often doing things that the computer is better at. We suck at playing computer. So, Befehlszeilenbeklemmung, command line anxiety, having forgotten what you wanted to enter into the command prompt. The terminal interfaces we use are well designed. That's because most of them are 40 years old. But that's not the problem. Because we can imitate great examples from the past. What matters is that I want to work with people who aren't programmers. I also want to teach people and seriously get them started with programming. I don't want to tell them what they're supposed to enter into their terminal when stuff goes wrong. And the same is true in my job, where people are using my build automation. If your process is sufficiently complex, you need to automate it. Browserliebe, browser love sharing. It means lovingly sharing an internet address for browserly consumption. Browsers are powerful, both as instruments of media consumption, like looking at cat pictures, and as instruments of creation. URLs are rad. So the demo I'm going to show you later is browser-based. I wanted to build something that I can share immediately. There is no README with a pattern of commands or please download this and install that instructions. It just works, hopefully, because it's a live coding demo. So let's look at a couple of problem areas. I'll focus on dependency management and building today. So what does depend mean? It means that the code that we write depends on a stack of things working properly, which is the hardware, the operating system, Node.js or browsers, and dependencies we use. So as an example, let's assume that we have a Mac with Node installed, and let's build a package. So I don't know about you, but I had a fantastic breakfast this morning. So let's write a module for making bacon pancakes. So usually I search for modules that I can use. So let's go to npm-search.com and look for things we can use. There's also npmjs.org search and the CLI, but I usually get this. I don't even understand it. Well, I do, but. So then we found our packages, and then I need to install these packages. So I switched to my terminal and entered the appropriate commands for installing the packages I found. Next. Well, what next? I wait for a few seconds or minutes, depending on what it's going to download. And after that's done, I open my file from the terminal. And finally, we're in the code. In my editor, like 10 minutes later, I begin by requiring the modules I installed just before. And then I can write my function, making use of the modules I found. We'll do this in the demo. At last, I export my bacon pancake factory function, because we need to be a proper module citizen. But then I go back to step 1 and 2 to find and install a suitable testing framework. And now back to the editor and add a test command to package.json and create a file that puts the tests, create a file to put the tests for our module. So in the test, we're going to require the test framework and our own module, and finally write our test. Phew. So I don't know about you, but this is really complicated. This really sucks when you're maintaining many small modules. You have to do almost all of this by hand and many, many times. And it's incredibly easy to make mistakes. It also gets very repetitive for files within the same package. For example, when you're building a React app with nicely separated components in their own modules, you'll have to require React in every single file. As programmers, seeing the same block of code usually makes us frothing with rage. That's not dry. But in this case, we accept our reality. Weird, isn't it? So what if we went back to here and we remove everything that isn't our code? We're left with the function declaration. It's calling pancakes and bacon, and it's passing an array of their results into fry. What if we just try to run this now? We get errors that some words are not defined. Well, of course, you might think, but think for a moment. These are words that have meaning for us. We know that they exist somewhere, and we know what they're supposed to do. We have expectations. If we understand them, why can't the computer? So to help the computer understand, let's look at how the computer sees code. This large blob of text is the abstract syntax tree, and you don't need to read it. So we search the AST for words, or in terms of JS, identifier nodes. And each time we find an identifier, we check whether it has been defined anywhere in our file. And since they're not defined in this case, we get a list of these 3 identifiers, which is what we saw before. So we have our unknown identifiers, and we match these against our known words. What are known words? They're things we remember. They're modules we've written ourselves. There are modules on NPM like React or Lodash, or there are modules like node built-ins like HTTP or FS. Well, it turns out that a simple functional transformation of your code and a prediction of words that you refer to yield the expanded code that you can just run, that you can just pass into Node.js as binary, and it'll work. The way that works is by, of course, prepending the appropriate require calls and exporting your main module. We'll see that in a bit. So, and that means that a series of manual commands you have to enter into your terminal and your editor can be expressed by just mentioning a word. I think that's a pretty powerful idea. So, before we go to the demo, I want to talk about building stuff. So, what does build mean in our context? It means taking our source and our dependencies and creating something that can be executed by Node or a web browser. Docker is an amazing tool, and we're going to use it as a very efficient build system and runtime. You can post a tarball archive of your code and your dependencies to a Docker daemon HTTP endpoint, and it'll extract the archive and build our package, running any commands we tell it to. And in the end, it'll spit out a nice little container which can be run on any other Docker host. That means we can run this container on our local development environment, but also on a CoreOS cluster of thousands of nodes. To keep it short, at the end of the word lookup phase, we end up with a dependency tree. sort of like an npm shrinkwrap file, which includes everything required to install something. OK, demo time. So fn f1. Thank you, Jan. That didn't work now. Let's turn on the... command F1? Yes! Are you seeing what I'm seeing? I think so. So this is my prototype editor. So we go in here, and we have a name, and we have a description. Oh, hold on.
Bacon pancakes, that's what it's gonna make. Bacon pancake.
Can someone come up here and dance, please? So this is probably something went wrong here, because this function is returning a German sausage specialty. So let's just, turn this into something which we want. So making bacon pancakes means frying bacon and pancakes. And let's remove this comment. So we have used these words, and our editor knows that these are not defined yet. So we go in here into bacon, and we implement this function, and we go back, and it's defined. Magic. And the good kind of magic. And we go to pancakes, and we return pancakes. And we go back again, another function defined. And there's one more left, which is frying. So frying means making a set of items hot. So we take the items we want to cook, and we join them in a string. OK? So we go back once more, and we have a program which the computer is fully able to understand and knows everything we are using in our program. But we're not calling this function yet, so let's create a command line interface for this. OK, so we are going to build the JSConf breakfast command line interface. So it's a new module. And we are going to just, log, given it's a command line interface, we log something to std out. So we call our make bacon pancakes function, and we also call the function we just defined in our program. Make sense? OK. So here comes the Docker part. When I click engage, this dependency tree, which has been generated, is going to be turned into a tarball archive, and it's going to be posted to the Docker daemon, which is going to turn it into a nice image we can execute. So this is the name of the image. Let's go to my terminal and run it. Works. So let's go into the Docker container and run bash. Free Docker tutorial. So here we have index.js, which has a require statement. We have the code we typed into our editor, and we are exporting this thing as a module. And we also have node modules with the function we referenced. And there's another index.js in here, which is our bacon pancakes function. And it is also requiring stuff. And this is probably very obvious by now, but there's even more modules, right? And it, like bacon, for example, also has an index.js file. And all it is doing is returning a string bacon and exporting itself. So we turned this very simple to understand, I would say, representation of a module hierarchy into something very obvious. So the next step is kind of, let's go out of this container again and just run it again. And I think this is a very sorry amount of bacon pancakes for a JSConf. So let's go back and, we could just do this. Yeah, run it multiple times, and engage again. Right, and run it, but that's not very exciting. So I know a function on NPM which does this much better than I could do. So not only does our editor know words from our own creations, it also knows all the words which exist on NPM. So I can just reference Lodash here and use the times function and tell it to run this function 20 times. And everything works as expected. And if I clicked on this, it's going to open Lodash on NPM, because that's what I was referencing. That's right. So we built this again. And I run it again. And it works. So let's descend into the madness of the container once more. This time, my node modules has Lodash, and it's really just Lodash, right? It does exactly what you would do if you wanted to install Lodash. It installs it. So, I would say one more thing, but it's not really that special. Anyway, one more thing. We created a CLI from our Make Bacon Pancakes. Oh, this is awesome. Let's make them pancakes with maple syrup. Fantastic. And go back and recompile or whatever our CLI and run it again. Sorry. And we have maple syrup. Like, it's really, right? Like, I want to change something of this program. I just do it and I run it again and it works. I don't have to bump dependencies or symlink or whatever. Getting to the one more thing part here, which is we could also turn this function into an API, right? So let's say we have the breakfast server API. Sorry, Bacon Pancake API. And in here, we're just going to do the hello world to Node.js example. So we create a server, and the computer is smart because it knows suddenly what you already knew, that HTTP is, of course, the built-in HTTP module by Node.js. So we just are going to answer this request with a response, and of course, we're going to make bacon pancakes. And it works. So we call this function. And we listen to a port. And for convenience reasons, we're also going to add a log line. What's the magic IP address? I don't know. Let's copy paste it. OK. This is the IP address of the Docker daemon. Right. So we built this. And there's some amazing Docker output. And we run this. What was the name? Bacon Pancake API? It's really great if all you have to do is remember names of things. OK. And it works. So, such timing, vary in time. Oops, you're not supposed to see this. This is my reality. Let's switch back to your reality. Yes. So this is happening. There are smart people who are already doing stuff like this. For example, Hoodies Grunt Semantic Release completely automates an error-prone process for publicly releasing new software bundles. So basically, all you do is the local part. You say, I want a new version, and I want it to be a patch. And it even knows that. You can just say you want a new version. It's going to look at your commits and figure out the kind of release you want to do. Have a look. And as anything that will ever be done in the next 50 years in software development, most of it will already have been done by mad scientists in this IRC channel. It's true. Look into the log files. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank great friends who give me great ideas, and people who support you. I'm working on this stuff right now, and I would like to ship it to you. And I, for one, am looking forward to the party now. Thank you.